12. Stoic Lessons for Clear Thinking, Expanded and Enhanced Edition. What if you've never truly thought for yourself, but only reacted, repeated, and absorbed what the world handed you? Could it be that your clearest thinking doesn't come from knowing more, but from pausing more, questioning more, and owning your mind? Imagine a life where you no longer spiral in emotion, opinion, or noise, but rise above with the calm power of deep, clear thought. Let's begin. 12. Stoic Lessons They Never Taught You About Thinking. Clearly vertical bar, deep inner clarity begins. Here, most people walk through life thinking they're thinking, but they're not. They're reacting, repeating, absorbing, they scroll, they judge, they speak, all before they pause. No one teaches you how to think clearly. Not in school, not in society, not even in the moments when clarity matters most. But without clear thinking, you're not really free. You're just operating on someone else's program, dancing to someone else's tune. In this episode, we're going to break that pattern. We're going to rebuild your mind, thought by thought, the Stoic way. No noise, no ego, just truth. Because once your mind is your own, no one can control you again. 1. Most people don't think, they react. The average person lives in a state of constant mental autopilot. They scroll through headlines and absorb opinions. Without examining them, they hear a rumor and repeat it before verifying they're offended, before understanding defensive, before listening and reactive, before reflecting. Most of what we call thinking is actually just a mix of emotional reactivity, mental, laziness, and social mimicry. But the Stoic sees this for what it is: a dangerous illusion. Real thinking is deliberate, it's active, it's slow, it's uncomfortable, and that's why so few people do it. We're raised in a world that values speed, not depth. You're rewarded for quick answers, hot takes, fast decisions, not thoughtful reflection. But reaction is not thought, it is the absence of thought. It's the gap where fear, habit, and conditioning take over. And in that gap we surrender our agency, Epictetus said. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. But how can you choose your reaction if you don't first pause to understand what's happening? Let's be honest. Pausing is hard, thinking deeply is hard. It means resisting the urge to jump to conclusions. It means sitting with uncertainty, asking questions, and sometimes admitting that you don't know. And in a culture obsessed with appearing confident, I don't know feels like failure. But in truth, it's the beginning of wisdom. The Stoic doesn't rush to judge. He trains himself to stop, to breathe, to consider. His clarity is built not on speed, but on stillness. If someone insults him, he doesn't react. He questions, why does this affect me? What am I clinging to that gives their words power? If he's faced with a difficult decision, he doesn't reach for the easiest answer. He evaluates what aligns with my principles, what will matter in the long term. This is thinking, not reacting, and it's this discipline, this willingness to think slowly in a world that rushes, that makes the Stoic untouchable. You see, clarity isn't just about intelligence, it's about courage. The courage to not follow the crowd, the courage to hold your tongue when others shout, the courage to sit in silence when noise feels easier. Most people never cultivate this. They live in mental chaos, ruled by the loudest emotion of the moment. But you can train differently. You can start right now. Ask yourself, when was the last time you really examined your thoughts? Not just repeated them, but challenged them. Not just reacted to life, but investigated your patterns, your assumptions, your beliefs. If your answer is rare or never, that's your sign. That's the starting point. Because until you reclaim your thoughts, you are not truly living. You are being lived. So today, begin to slow the process. Don't answer so quickly. Don't argue so fast. Don't assume you already know. Let discomfort be your signal. If a question stirs unease in you, lean into it. Let that be the work. The Stoic doesn't fear hard questions. He embraces them because on the other side of reflection is freedom. And real freedom begins not with action but with awareness. 2. A noisy mind is an untrained mind. Have you ever sat in silence only to find that your own thoughts are louder than any external noise that's not peace, that's inner chaos, disguised as productivity? The mind left untrained becomes like a room filled with dozens of radios blaring at once. Every frequency is competing for your attention. Regrets from yesterday, fears about tomorrow, to-do lists, imagined conversations, judgments, cravings, worries. No. Clarity can exist in that environment. No wisdom can be heard through that noise. And yet, most people live like this every single day, mistaking constant mental activity for clarity. But the Stoic sees this for what it truly is: distraction, not depth. There's a reason Marcus Aurelius began many of his meditations in silence. He wasn't writing for others. He was training his own mind to bring thought to bring focus to chaos, because the untrained mind doesn't serve you. It controls you. It hijacks your attention and scatters it across every external trigger. But a trained mind, a still mind, becomes your greatest ally. It becomes the fortress in which you find strength, wisdom, and direction, especially when the world outside loses its balance. We often think of noise as external, the notifications, the news, the opinions of others. But the real noise, the most dangerous kind, is internal. It's that constant mental chatter that goes unchecked, the narrative that never stops spinning, the inner critic that never sleeps. And because we hear it so often, we assume it's normal. But normal is not the same as healthy. The Stoic doesn't settle for normal. He pursues mastery, and mastery begins with silence. Imagine for a moment your mind as a pool of water. Every thought, every distraction, every worry is a stone thrown into it. The more stones, the more ripples, the harder it is to see the bottom. But in stillness, the water clears. You begin to see what's beneath your values, your intentions, your purpose. That's what Stoicism trains you to do. Not to silence every thought, but to become the calm observer beneath them. Not to eliminate the noise, but to no longer be ruled by it. This is why practices like meditation, journaling, or even conscious breathing are essential to the Stoic path. They're not spiritual fluff, they're disciplines, tools to return the mind to order. And it's through this order that we reclaim power. A noisy mind is reactive, impulsive, and fragile. A quiet mind is deliberate, focused, and resilient. So how do you begin to quiet the noise? Start by noticing it every time your attention jumps pause. Every time you feel the urge to respond, to check, to fix. Breathe. Create space between stimulus and response. That space is where your clarity lives. And over time, that space widens. You begin to see things others miss. You begin to hear the subtle truths beneath the surface. Noise, you begin to lead your mind instead of following it. Blindly, Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that mastery begins not with control over others, but control over your own attention, over your own thinking, over the noise in your head that you've been conditioned to accept. But Stoic doesn't accept chaos. He transforms it. He trains his mind until silence becomes strength, until stillness becomes a weapon, until the loudest room in the world cannot shake the calm he's built within. So the next time your thoughts feel overwhelming, remember that noise is not your identity. It's a signal, a call to stillness, a reminder that true clarity doesn't shout, it whispers. And if you're quiet enough, you just might hear it. 3 emotions. Distort perception. When emotion surges, clarity retreats. That's a truth most people ignore, not because they don't believe it, but because they're so consumed by the feeling they can't see beyond it. Anger makes you feel certain that you've been wronged. Fear convinces you the worst is inevitable. Sadness whispers that nothing will ever change in the grip of emotion. Perception shrinks the world, becomes distorted like looking through cracked glass. But if you pause long enough, if you resist the urge to react immediately, you'll start to notice something powerful. Your thoughts were not wrong. They were incomplete. The Stoics didn't reject emotion. They studied it. They knew it. Wasn't weakness to feel it was dangerous only when it ruled unchecked. Seneca warned, "The most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." That means learning the difference between feeling something and becoming it, between acknowledging the anger and letting it drive the car. The difference is everything. Think about the last time you were deeply hurt or afraid in that moment. Did you think clearly? Did you seek truth or seek confirmation? Emotion has a way of narrowing our awareness. It filters information. It frames situations in extremes. That's why emotional decisions, though they feel real in the moment, so often lead to regret. In hindsight, you didn't see things as they were. You saw them through the lens of a wounded ego or a frightened heart. But a Stoic does something radical. He creates distance between the stimulus and the story, learns to pause and ask, what else could this mean? He doesn't suppress the emotion, he observes it, names it, studies it, because the second you can name a feeling you gain leverage over it. I am feeling anxious is very different from I am anxious. The first is awareness, the second is identity, and identity shapes behavior. This clarity comes with training it. Doesn't happen in a moment. It's a lifestyle. You start noticing how your mood colors your thoughts, you catch yourself before reacting. You journal after a conflict, not just to vent, but to understand, what was I feeling? Why did I interpret it that way? What would I have seen if I wasn't so caught in my story? Marcus Aurelius, perhaps the most powerful man of his time, wrote to himself, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. That is the essence of emotional mastery, not control through force, but liberation through perspective. And here's the paradox: when you allow yourself to fully feel an emotion without reacting, without escaping, it passes faster. What prolongs suffering is resistance. What feeds chaos is denial. But to sit with the fire calmly is to rob it of its power. You don't become a Stoic. By eliminating emotion, you become one by refusing to be enslaved by it. Clarity is not the absence of feeling, it's the ability to think through it, to hold both the emotion and the analysis in the same breath. That's how you grow. That's how you lead, because life will test your emotions constantly, but how you think within them will define the course of your life. So the next time you're overwhelmed by jealousy, anger, panic, heartbreak, ask yourself, what am I not seeing clearly right now? What story am I believing too quickly? And then step back, breathe, look again, because emotion clouds the glass, but reason wipes it clean. 4. Don't inherit beliefs, examine them. You were born into a web of ideas. You never chose beliefs about what's right, wrong, what's valuable, and worthless. What success looks like, what love should feel like, what failure means, how much you should speak, how long you should suffer, and how far you're allowed to go. They came from your family, your culture, your religion, your teachers, your media. And you accepted them before you could question them, not because you were naive, but because you were human. We're wired to adapt to our environment, to absorb what's around us, so we can survive. But at some point, survival isn't enough. At some point, you have to decide, is this thought truly mine, or is it just a hand-me-down? The Stoics believed that philosophy was not a doctrine to be memorized, but a practice of ongoing self-examination. Epictetus said, don't just say you have read books, show that through them you have learned to think better. The goal was not to adopt someone else's wisdom, but to arrive at your own truth through rigorous questioning, and that starts with having the courage to turn inward and challenge the assumptions that guide your life. Ask yourself, who told you that your worth comes from your productivity, that being vulnerable is weakness that you have to win every argument to be respected, that money equals success, or that love must hurt to be real? These beliefs run silently in the background, dictating your choices without your permission. They shape your habits, fuel your anxiety, and often lead you into invisible cages. But here's the turning point. Once you realize that every belief was introduced to you, not born within you, you reclaim your right to inspect it. You become the editor of your own. Mind you, don't just delete beliefs recklessly. You hold them up to the light. You ask, is this still useful? Is it true? Does it bring me peace or only pressure? Sometimes the beliefs that served your parents will not serve your future. Sometimes what made sense in your culture is not what makes you whole. The Stoic doesn't hold on out of loyalty. He lets go out of clarity. And clarity comes from honesty. Brutal, uncomfortable, liberating. Honesty. You must learn to live by principle, not by programming. That means choosing what to believe based on experience, reason, and alignment with your deepest values, not based on fear of rejection or need for approval. The Stoic mind is not rigid, but examined, not passive, but intentional. And this process never ends. It evolves with your awareness today. You might question your beliefs about success. Tomorrow, it might be your beliefs about love or pain or time. The point isn't to arrive, it's to keep refining. Because your beliefs are the foundation of your life, and a shaky foundation eventually collapses under pressure. This is not easy work. It requires solitude, reflection, and the willingness to detach from familiar stories. But what you gain is sovereignty, the ability to stand in a room full of noise and still know your truth, to be challenged and stay rooted, to walk your own path, not out of rebellion, but out of recognition that no one else can live your life for you. So take time to inspect the architecture of your mind. Ask, what have I accepted without question? And what would my life look like if I dared to question it now? 5. Thinking is a discipline, not a reaction. Most people believe they're thinking when they're simply reacting. A comment provokes them, a headline enrages them, a failure discourages them, and they assume their mental activity is deliberate. But thinking isn't what happens when your emotions get loud. It's what begins when your emotions quiet down. Real thinking, the kind that brings clarity, indirection, and inner strength, is a deliberate act. It takes effort, takes structure, it takes stillness. And in a world where instant reaction is rewarded, that kind of thinking has become rare, but more vital than ever. The Stoics didn't treat thought like a reflex. They treated it like training. Just as an athlete builds strength through repetition, the Stoic trains the mind to see clearly by slowing down, stepping back, and observing before acting. If you want to improve, wrote Epictetus, be content to be thought, foolish, and stupid. Why? Because pausing to think in a reactive world often looks like weakness. But that pause is power. That pause is where wisdom lives. When you rush into action, you miss the space where clarity could have spoken. You fall into old patterns, defending yourself, proving a point, satisfying ego. But thinking well means catching yourself before the autopilot takes over. It means saying, wait, what's really going on here? What's true? What matters now? That moment of restraint isn't hesitation. It's mastery. You don't build a clear mind by consuming more. You build it by filtering better. Not every idea deserves your agreement. Not every feeling deserves your obedience. Not every voice deserves your attention. The discipline of thinking is the discipline of discernment. And that's something very few people practice. We scroll, we react, we echo what we hear. But when was the last time you truly questioned your own first thought? Train your mind to pause before it concludes, to ask, is this helpful? Is this wise? Is this even mine? Don't accept the first interpretation. Dig deeper. Ask why. Ask again. The more layers you peel back, the closer you get to truth, and the farther you move from reaction. This discipline, like all disciplines, requires discomfort. It's easier to respond with sarcasm than with curiosity. It's easier to label someone than to understand them. It's easier to confirm your bias than to challenge it. But ease is not the Stoics' path. Growth is, and growth demands mental effort, not just emotional release. Seneca warned against drifting. He said, if you don't know which port you're sailing to, no wind is favorable. In other words, if you don't think clearly, no decision will feel right because you're not grounded in intention. Thinking becomes the compass. Not feeling, not urgency, not habit, but thought. Clear, tested, self-owned. The mind is like a blade without sharpening. It rusts without use. It dulls. You don't become wise by waiting. You become wise by practicing daily, consistently, patiently. The world will offer shortcuts. React now. Decide fast. Speak louder. But the Stoic chooses the slower route, not because he's weak, but because he's in control. So ask yourself, today, am I reacting or am I thinking? And if I'm not thinking, what truth might I find if I finally begin? 6. Truth is not found in opinion, but in observation. We live in a world obsessed with opinion. Everyone has one. Everyone shares one. And the louder someone speaks, the more believable their version of truth seems to become. But opinion, no matter how confident or emotional, is not clarity. It's not understanding. And it's certainly not wisdom. The Stoic doesn't take what people say at face value, including the chatter in his own mind. He watches, he studies, he separates what is felt from what is real, because real thinking doesn't begin with belief. It begins with observation. Imagine you're standing in the middle of a foggy forest. Your mind, if untrained, will try to define the shapes in front of you immediately. That's danger, that's betrayal, that's failure. But the Stoic doesn't rush to name the fog. He waits for the fog to lift. He doesn't guess, he looks. He allows space for the truth to emerge unshaped by fear or assumption. Marcus Aurelius wrote, If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed. That's not the posture of someone trying to be right, that's the posture of someone trying to see. Clear thinking means distinguishing between the event and your interpretation of it. Did they ignore your message, or did you assume silence meant rejection? Did you fail, or did you simply receive feedback from the world, the raw data of life? What actually happened is usually neutral, but the stories we wrap around it are what cause suffering, shame, or anger, and unless we're willing to dissect those stories, we stay trapped in illusions. Most of what we call truth is nothing. More than repetition, we hear something often enough, from parents, from society, from fear, and it hardens into belief. But repetition is not reality. The Stoic refuses to inherit conclusions without investigation. He asks, is this actually true? Can I observe it in my life? Or am I just echoing someone else's noise? That's the difference between living awake and living reactive awake. People don't just ask, what do I believe? They ask, why do I believe it? They track the thought back to its source, and if the source is bias or assumption or old pain masquerading as logic, they don't cling to it, they let it go. Because truth matters more than ego. To build a mind like that, you must become a student of your own experience. Not a judge, not a critic, a student. Watch your behavior, notice your impulses. Observe what triggers you and what calms you. This is where wisdom begins. Not in books, but in quiet self-observation. The willingness to see without commentary. The Stoics were not cold or indifferent. They were attentive. Their clarity didn't come from emotional suppression, but from emotional examination. They knew that true insight comes not when we feel less, but when we interpret less. The fewer assumptions we carry, the more clearly we can see what's in front of us. So the next time your mind screams a conclusion, pause. Don't ask, what do I think? Ask, what do I see? Because that small shift, that refusal to confuse opinion with observation, is the root of all clear thinking. Certainty is often a symptom of ignorance. It's comforting to be certain, to believe you're right, to feel like you figured it out, but certainty, the rigid, unwavering kind, often comes not from clarity, but from the fear of not knowing. The Stoic doesn't chase the illusion of absolute answers. He chooses awareness over assurance, inquiry over arrogance, because the truth is, the more you truly understand, the more you realize how much you still don't know. We've all met people who cling to their opinions. Like armor, they can't entertain other viewpoints. They shut down questions, they speak with authority, but rarely with understanding. That's not wisdom, that's defensiveness, and behind that wall of certainty often lies a deep the fear of being wrong. Epictetus warned us of this. It is impossible to begin to learn that which one thinks one already knows. The ego whispers, I already know. But the mind that wants to grow asks, what am I missing? You see, certainty can be a trap. Once you decide you're right, you stop exploring, you stop asking, you stop seeing. Your mind becomes a courtroom, not a classroom, but a Stoic's mind remains open not to everything, but to anything. That's rooted in reason. He doesn't fear doubt. He honors it, because doubt is not weakness. It's a signal that you're thinking for yourself. Look at the people who've truly changed the world. The thinkers, the scientists, the sages, they all had one thing in common. The courage to say, I don't know yet. They didn't settle into fixed beliefs. They kept refining, testing, observing, and the moment they found new evidence, they adjusted, not because they lacked conviction, but because they loved truth, more than ego in daily life. This mindset is rare, but powerful. It means listening more than speaking. It means asking, can you explain that? Instead of rushing to debate, it means being strong enough to sit in the discomfort of uncertainty without rushing to patch it up with opinion. Most people panic in ambiguity, but the Stoic becomes still. And this is key. Uncertainty is not indecision. It's not paralysis. It's presence. It's the ability to stay with a problem long enough to understand it without needing to immediately label or solve it. The wise are slow to conclude because they know conclusions can be costly. They don't need to win arguments. They want to understand reality. If someone questions your view and your first instinct is to defend, pause. Ask yourself, is my belief based on experience, on evidence, on thought? Or is it based on habit, fear, or someone else's voice. I never questioned. This is the true work of a clear mind, not defending beliefs but refining them. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, wrote daily reminders to himself like a student, not a ruler. He didn't assume he was right because he was emperor. He kept asking, observing, doubting, correcting. That's why he became wise. Not because he was certain, but because he was humble. So here's your challenge. Trade some of your certainty for curiosity. Don't be the person who always needs to be right. Be the one who's always ready to learn, because in a world full of confident noise, a quiet, open mind is the rarest and strongest kind. 8. You are not your thoughts. This might be one of the most liberating truths you'll ever embrace, and one of the hardest to truly live, because for most of us, our thoughts feel like reality. If a thought says, "I'm not good enough," we believe it. If the mind whispers, "You're failing," we don't question it. But the Stoic knows thoughts are not facts. They are patterns, they are habits, they are noise, until we choose to observe, examine, and either let them pass or give them purpose. The distance between you and your mind is the beginning of freedom. When you recognize that you can watch a thought without becoming it, everything changes. Suddenly, your anger doesn't own you, your fear doesn't to command you, your worry doesn't define you. You become the witness, the still presence behind the storm, like Epictetus taught. It's not things that disturb us, but our judgment about them. The judgment lives in thought, and the power lives in your ability to choose how seriously you take it. In practical terms, this means learning to sit with a thought. Instead of sprinting with it when anxiety says, "This will go wrong," you pause, you say, "Thank you, mind, for trying to protect me. But let's look closer." When jealousy appears, you don't shove it away or let it drive you. You ask, "What wound is this revealing in me?" That act of stepping back isn't denial, it's mastery. It's the work of the philosopher-warrior, not to be thoughtless, but to think with discipline. Most people live like passengers in their own minds. They go wherever the thought train takes them, into anger, into doubt, into fantasy, into shame. But the Stoic steps off the train. He builds a station, a place to observe, to question, to understand. That's why meditation isn't just some soft spiritual practice. It's mental combat training. The more you practice observing your thoughts, the less you'll be ruled by them. And here's something important. You don't have to believe every thought just because it feels familiar. In fact, the most dangerous thoughts are usually the ones you've rehearsed the most. "I'm always like this. This always happens to me. I'll never change." These are mental loops, not truths. And, just like any loop, they can be interrupted, rewritten, replaced. You are not what your mind repeats. You are what you choose to reinforce. That's why the Stoic focuses on cultivating thoughts rooted in reason, virtue, clarity, and purpose. Not fantasies, not fears, not external noise. He trains the mind to serve him, not enslave him. This shift also brings humility, because when you see that your mind is just a tool, not an oracle, you stop clinging to every belief like it's gospel. You become more open, less defensive. You stop needing to always be right, because you're more interested in seeing clearly than proving something. So when the storm rises, when doubt or fear or anger pulls at you, don't suppress it, don't obey it. Step back, observe, ask, "Is this thought helping me live with courage and clarity, or is it just noise?" In that pause, in that awareness, lies the beginning of real strength. The mind is a wild animal, but with patience and practice it can become your greatest ally. Just never forget, you are not your thoughts, you are the thinker, and the thinker has a choice. 9. If you don't control your mind, someone else will, in a world flooded with voices, screens, noise, and endless opinions. Your mind is prime real estate, and everyone wants a piece of it. The news cycle, social media advertising, even well-meaning people around you, they all compete for your attention, your focus, your emotional energy. And if you're not deliberate, if you're not conscious, your mind becomes a battleground where you're not even the one holding the sword. Think about it. How many of your thoughts today were truly your own? How many were inherited from culture, absorbed from others, or planted by fear? If you scroll for an hour and leave feeling anxious, angry, or less than who really won that hour, the Stoic sees this clearly. a mind left unguarded will be ruled. And that's not just a philosophical idea. It's a psychological and strategic truth. The human brain is designed to adapt. It takes in repetition. It mirrors what it's exposed to. That means if you're constantly surrounded by chaos, drama, superficial values, and noise, your thinking will reflect that you'll start solving shallow problems. You'll crave validation. Without even realizing it, you'll react instead of reflect, and slowly your inner compass, the one that tells you what's right, what's real, what's you, starts to fade beneath layers of programming. The Stoics taught, no man is free who is not master of himself, and mastery begins with mental sovereignty, not control in the rigid, harsh sense, but awareness, ownership, and the courage to choose what deserves your mental space, because if you don't choose, someone else already has. This is why routines matter, why silence matters, why reading, reflection, and solitude aren't luxuries, they're shields. They're how you build inner structure strong enough to resist the pull of a chaotic world every time you wake up and check your phone before checking in with yourself. You're outsourcing your direction. Every time you let someone else's urgency become your priority, you surrender authorship over your day. Controlling your mind isn't about micromanaging every thought. It's about curating your inputs. It's about choosing what you consume, who you listen to, and how you react. It's about being intentional, about building an environment that nourishes clarity rather than confusion. And yes, it takes effort because it's easier to scroll than to sit with silence. It's easier to react than to reason. But that's exactly the trap, because what's easy is rarely what's right. The path of the Stoic isn't easy. It's precise. It requires self-command, and that begins with commanding what enters your mind. So today, ask yourself, who is shaping your thoughts? What ideas are you letting in unchecked? And more importantly, are you the one driving or just a passenger in someone else's narrative? Because here's the truth. Your mind is a fortress or a funnel, a weapon or a weakness, and the difference is how you choose to manage it. Thinking well requires thinking slowly. In a culture addicted to speed, to instant responses, quick judgments, and fast solutions, we've come to equate fast thinking with intelligence. But the Stoic knows that clarity doesn't come in a rush. Wisdom doesn't sprint truth like a deep river moves slowly beneath the surface, and to reach it, you must be still long enough to listen. Modern life rewards the quick reply. Social media trains us to form opinions in seconds. Headlines demand emotional reactions. Before we've read the first paragraph, arguments break out, not because people disagree, but because no one paused long enough to truly understand. Thinking has become performance, not process, but real thought that takes time. And the Stoic embraces this slowness as a strength, not a flaw. The mind, when rushed, skips the most important part of reasoning, reflection. You can gather all the information in the world, but if you don't give it room to settle, it becomes noise. Imagine pouring water into a muddy glass. You can't force the clarity. You have to wait. You have to let the dust sink. Thinking slowly is how you let the sediment fall and the insight rise. Seneca warned of this in his letters, how a person who is always in motion never sees where they're going. Haste, he said, makes even good decisions dangerous, because without time, we react from fear, from ego, from habit. But with time, with silence, we react from depth, from intention, from truth. Slowness allows nuance. It lets you hold two conflicting ideas. Without panicking, it gives you room to ask, is this true? Is this useful? Is this mine? And those questions, not just data, not speed, are what separate the wise from the clever. You may think you don't have time to slow down, but that's the illusion. Every mistake made in haste will cost you more time. Later, every word spoken in anger will take longer to repair. Every decision made under pressure without clarity becomes another problem to fix. Tomorrow, slow thinking isn't a delay. An investment. The Stoic does not rush to speak. He does not rush to judge. He creates internal space between stimulus and response, between emotion and expression. Because in that space, he becomes unshakable, not because he knows everything, but because he has trained himself not to be rushed by anything. So when the world screams, decide. Now the Stoic whispers, let me think. And that moment, that pause, is not hesitation, it is strength. It is the act of reclaiming sovereignty over your attention, your decisions, your life. Thinking slowly is not about doing less, it's about doing better. It's about cutting through the noise with the blade of precision. And it's a practice, one that must be sharpened daily. So today, when you feel rushed to respond, when urgency clouds your mind, when emotion begs for release, pause, breathe, wait, let the thought grow roots before it bears fruit. 11. Most conflict is the result of poor thinking. At first glance, we think conflict is born from disagreement, a clash of beliefs, values, or desires. But if you look deeper, you'll see that most arguments, rupture, and wars, both internal and external, aren't really about the thing being debated, they're about the way we think, or rather, the way we fail to think clearly. When emotion overrides reasoning, the mind turns into a battlefield. A small comment becomes an attack. A delay feels like rejection. A difference in opinion transforms into betrayal. And why? Because we didn't pause. Because we didn't clarify what was said, what was meant, what was real. We reacted to a story we created, not the reality in front of us. The Stoics understood that the root of many conflicts is not malice, it's misjudgment. Epictetus said it best. It's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Someone ignores your message, and your mind starts spinning. Maybe they're angry, maybe you've done something wrong, maybe they don't respect you. But in truth, they could simply be busy, tired, or unaware. Your suffering wasn't caused by them. It was caused by how you interpreted the silence when we assume the worst, when we respond before understanding, when we speak before listening. We multiply tension, but if we trained ourselves to question the first wave of emotion, to examine the thought beneath the reaction, we'd find fewer battles to fight. We'd realize that most of the time what we took personally wasn't personal at all. Conflict is often the smoke, poor thinking is the fire, and the problem isn't just the noise we create with others, it's the noise we create within. How many nights have we lost sleep over something we misunderstood? How much time have we wasted replaying conversations we never clarified? How many opportunities have we missed because we thought we knew someone's intention without asking? The Stoic doesn't just seek peace outside, he wages war against sloppy thinking. Inside, he doesn't assume he's right. He doesn't believe every thought that crosses his mind. He learns to challenge himself before challenging others. And because of this, he becomes a calmer presence in every room. Not because nothing affects him, but because he filters reality through reason, not reactivity. Imagine if we taught this in schools, not just facts or formulas, but how to pause before judgment, how to separate feeling from fact, how to disagree without dehumanizing, how to hear what someone is actually saying, not what we fear they mean. That kind of thinking would change more than arguments. It would change cultures. So the next time tension rises, try this before defending, ask before correcting, understand before blaming, examine your own thinking. You may find the conflict dissolves without a word, because clarity, not control, is what neutralizes chaos. Clear thinking is peacemaking. It doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're wise. And it doesn't mean you avoid confrontation. It means you confront it with presence and clarity, not ego. 12. Your greatest power is not what you think, but how we often glorify ideas, the sharp insight, the clever, quote, the powerful belief. But the Stoics point us in a different direction. They remind us, it's not the thought itself that holds power, it's the structure of our thinking, the process, the way we examine, shape, and respond to the world through thought. That's where strength lives. Not in what we believe, but in how we arrive at those beliefs. Think about it too. People can face the same setback, the same rejection, loss, or betrayal, and one spirals, while the other rises. It's not because one had a better idea, it's because one had a better framework for thinking. One was trained to reflect, before reacting to find meaning, rather than blame to stand inside discomfort and look for clarity. That's not intellectual luck, that's mental discipline. Clear thinking begins with self-mastery. You become less reactive, less fragile, less easily pulled off course. You stop chasing every thought that passes through your mind. You begin to watch your mind, to challenge it, to slow it down. You start asking, is this true? Is this useful? Is this worthy of my peace? and suddenly your mind becomes a tool, not a trap. Marcus Aurelius said the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If your thoughts are chaotic, so is your life. But if your thoughts are deliberate, ordered, and rooted in reason, your life becomes clear, resilient, grounded. You're no longer a victim of emotion or noise. You're a craftsman. Shaping your perception with care, this is what separates those who drift from those who direct, those who are owned by their minds versus those who own them. Most people don't know. They can think differently. They've inherited scripts. They confuse noise for truth. But the Stoic is different. He chooses how to think, not what to think. And in that choice, he builds unshakable strength. So if you want to live with clarity, if you want to be emotionally grounded, focused, free, don't just fill your mind with information. Train it, challenge it, rewire it. Don't just adopt new thoughts. Learn to think through them. Don't just react. Reflect. Ask better questions. Build mental systems that hold under pressure. Your greatest power is not a clever quote or a borrowed idea. It's the mind that can question, pause, interpret, and choose. That's what makes you untouchable. That's what makes you free. When you look back at your life, you'll notice it wasn't the chaos outside that nearly broke you. It was the confusion within the noise, the impulses, the unchecked assumptions. That's what clouded your judgment. That's what made you doubt your worth, lose your focus and react, instead of respond. But clarity. Clarity changes everything. These 12 Stoic lessons weren't designed to make you smarter. They were designed to make you wiser, to give you tools, not just truths. To remind you that real strength doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from asking the right questions over and over again, especially when life gets loud. The Stoics didn't teach thinking for the sake of thinking. They taught it so we could live better, lead calmer, love deeper, and suffer less. Because when your mind is clear, your path becomes clear. When your thoughts are clean, your heart feels lighter. And when your reactions are rooted in reason, you become immovable. Not cold, but composed. Not detached, but discerning. Not unfailing, but unbreakable. So the next time the world presses in on you, pause, observe. Think like the philosopher you were meant to be. Not in theory, but in practice. Not to impress others, but to liberate yourself. That's the quiet revolution of Stoic thinking. It doesn't need applause. It just needs to be lived. If this episode helped you think more clearly, take a moment to breathe, then share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe for more, reflect deeply, and as always, stay grounded, stay calm, and stay free. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And make sure to subscribe for more money-making tips and powerful tools. I post new videos every week. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I always reply. Thank you for watching until the end. I'll see you in the next video. And if you have a moment, I'd love for you to check out the links below. Stoic Today is here to share content that helps you stay grounded, build confidence, attract wealth, and live a life of true success and fulfillment.